Welcome to the Bookers Alliance podcast, where we hold the pencil and the pencil is power. Coming at you right now is your host, Marky Mark, along with the man, the myth, the legend, Frank Donaldson. Join us as we discuss the ever-changing landscape of professional wrestling. So hang on tight, you jabronis, and enjoy the ride. All right, welcome in, everybody. Thank you for joining the Bookers Alliance podcast today. Pull your cell phone up a ringside seat. We got a hot one for you today, don't we, Frank?
Oh, we're good. And we got exciting times in the wrestling world, so we got to talk about some of it. But yeah, I'm really excited to talk about this topic. I think it's going to be some interesting conversations, so a little bit of back and forth here. So let's see where it goes.
Absolutely. So today's topic is, should we close the Forbidden Door? And that is a topic that we're going to debate today. And for those who may not know what Forbidden Door means, there is a, what would you call it? A cliche or a kind of a, all these companies can't work together. Hell, the WWE doesn't even recognize other companies most of the time.
No, I mean, like they always say, where's the benefit for it? There's really no benefit for WWE to work with anybody kind of, I guess, perceived as underneath. So they don't have a forbidden door. Their forbidden door is future endeavors. So that's the forbidden door you try to stay away from in WWE.
Right. So New Japan looked at it as the forbidden door. We want to work with other companies just like they did back in the 90s. And hell, prior to that with other territories and stuff with exchanges and in Mexico and other places like that. But, back in the 90s, WCW and New Japan Wrestling had a tight kind of alliance going on, which gave us things like, the Great Muta versus Sting.
Yeah, they definitely had a good working relationship. We got to see some of it. They had the Collision in Korea. They had they even did a video game together with the New Japan team. So, I mean, they had a good working relationship with them. But that's kind of where the conversation's going to go. Short of Great Muta, who else do you remember from those 90s wrestling days that...
Jushin Thunder Liger.
Okay, you got two. So I actually remember Masahiro Chono because he was in the NWO. There's a couple other names that you would see. Tenryu came through, Kabuki, but... My stance today is going to be, I think we should close the Forbidden Door. So it's going to be real interesting to see how this goes.
All right. So the Forbidden Door, what that is though, is members of New Japan wanted to work back with other companies again. Obviously, when AEW busted on the scene, they found a new partner to kind of join in an alliance with there, and they kicked down the Forbidden Door and joined into a pay-per-view. The first one was last year. Great pay-per-view in my opinion. We just had the second one, and again another phenomenal one. I just saying my opinion. Opinions are like balls. Everybody's
got one. Yeah, problem is some of them stink.
Very true. So we're going to get into conversation here. We're going to talk about 3 matches because God knows if we talked about all the matches, we'd be here for a month still talking. And
that's about how long the pay-per-view was.
Exactly.
It went for about a month. My God. I mean, I worked 2 shifts during that pay-per-view and I worked 10-hour days and it was still going.
So we want to talk about the probably the best match on the card that most people are raving about. We want to talk about Kenny Omega versus Will Ospreay 2. Their first one that they had was back in January. I believe it was January 17th in Wrestle Kingdom. I can't remember what day it was in January.
Tokyo Dome. I know
that. It
happened in the Tokyo Dome.
So for those who didn't see that match, go back and watch that one. Gonna spoil the ending, unfortunately, but Kenny Omega took that one. And as a result, he won the IWGP
Intercontinental or
it was
United
the US heavyweight.
It was one of those two. They got both over in All Japan. Somehow or another, they just took everybody's titles and made them their own.
But that's a side tension. I was gonna say, but their titles look really good.
yeah. No, I'll give them that. They are creative with them, but I mean, they do a lot of nice things in Japan. Like PlayStations and a lot of other stuff that we enjoy over here. So it's not like they don't know what they're doing. They got a handle on that.
Right. So their first match was over there, Wrestle Kingdom 17. Great match. One of the best that I've seen in a long time, just as far as athleticism, and just how they told the story in their match there. But again, this one was building off of that rivalry. And in this one, there was a little bit more of a spin on it with Don Callis.
So yeah, and they use that to help get through the match, but I don't know if it was necessary. Like, as I was watching the match, watching those two guys go, and with the skill level that both of them are working on and all that, do you really need outside interference
not them
crutch that match? I mean, because I think it detracted more from, it took away from, the in-ring action where you were looking at. I actually listened to Busted Open. We listen to all the other podcasts, and they said, I think Bully Ray said, as a matter of fact, he would have gave it the proverbial 5 stars, even though, they did a whole master's class on how the 5 stars is a bunch of horse manure and is what it is. But nonetheless, he was like, if I was using that scale, I would have gave it 5 stars until the Don Callis stuff came out there. That kind of made him say he would grade it down a little bit because it was unnecessary. And I remember watching it when it happened. I get it from the AEW perspective, because they created a story. They kind of want to build off of that. They've got other places to go after the Forbidden Door. This is kind of a one-off for them. So they have to advance their story while having the event. But that takes me to, again, the whole pay-per-view as a whole. So we'll get into all that later. But yeah, just that part of it there, I don't know. It was more of a detraction than it was, a feature, because it wasn't necessary with those two guys.
Agreed. So the athleticism that they put on in that match was, bar none, some of the best that I've seen in a long time. Not saying that other matches that we've watched here recently hasn't been athletic, but just the way that Kenny Omega is able to maneuver in the ring, and Will Ospreay is the same way. Will's just a younger version of Kenny, and I mean, they're mirrors of each other. Yeah. And that's what makes the chemistry between those two really good.
Yeah, absolutely. Even the fact that they don't work together, they don't see a lot of each other, but and I've heard it said a lot of times, just there's times where two guys touch in a wrestling ring, and the chemistry is just immediate, and you don't have to say a lot. You don't have to speak a lot. You just kind of get out there and let it go. And, when you have the right dance partner, you can make magic out there. And that's what those two guys can do.
Yeah, it was definitely magic.
Yeah.
Some of the moves that they pulled out, they've actually gotten some flack over. The Tiger Driver 91, where Kenny Omega just about died.
Basically. Yeah. I mean,
that was a move that I've not seen in a long, long time. Almost like
there's a reason.
Almost like the Spike Pile Driver. You don't see that much anymore.
No, only in AEW. You see all these crazy dangerous moves in AEW,
but it was definitely cool to see some of those moves, knowing the arsenal that Kenny Omega has, and knowing the arsenal that Will Ospreay has. One of the things that I remember you talking about after the end of that match is you were like, God, they killed me with the false finishes.
Yeah, I mean, they will false finish you to death. I mean, after a while, you see so many moves. And I mean, and I know it got the crowd up, but what was it? When Kenny Omega kicked out of his own finish on one, like, it was like impact, move, splash, cover, kick out, immediate.
Right.
What does that do for his finish? I mean, how do you protect your finish? Now, that's your finish. No one's kicked out of it when he does it, but he immediately, he no-sold it, kicked out of it. That, to me, was unnecessary too. But just all the false finishes as a whole, I mean, there had to be 30. I mean, if you go back to previously high-rated matches, like, let's say, Brett versus Owen, WrestleMania 10, Randy Savage, Ricky Steamboat, WrestleMania 3, they had a lot of false finishes, but it wasn't to the level that we had it here. I mean, we were getting finishers that were getting kicked out of with no problem. In those other matches, you didn't have finishers that they would kick out of a body slam or a quick small package, but they're throwing caution to the wind with kicking out of these finishers. And for me, again, with the level of match that they were having, that was unnecessary to it kind of put a stain on the match just because they devalued so many different moves in that match.
So that's where we're going to counterpoint, at least on this match. You see it through those glasses, and I see it through a different pair of glasses because I've come up watching a lot more of the Japanese wrestling style. and I actually understood, not saying that you didn't understand, you just weren't familiar with the story that they were telling in the ring as far as the Japanese way of putting together a match. I attribute it to watching movies like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Okay.
Or the martial arts that you see displayed in The Matrix.
Right.
Those are like superhuman moves that nobody should be able to pull off.
Yeah.
They look amazing. And most of the time, once somebody hits that move, it's not the end. That's just the middle. It keeps going, right?
True.
So that is kind of that Japanese style. And I will throw another comparison in there. Have you ever watched any Godzilla movies?
Some of the later one, like Godzilla versus King Kong.
Okay, Godzilla versus King Kong, Godzilla versus Mothra, things like that, right?
Yeah.
So you're looking at two super giants that are battling each other, that, you know, Godzilla is spitting lightning out of his freaking mouth, hitting King Kong. King Kong falls down, rolls around, but gets right back up, right?
Okay.
So that would, I mean, lightning coming out of somebody's mouth would kill any other mere human or whatever, right? So that's kind of the way that I look at Ospreay versus Omega. Those were two superheroes, two demigods in the ring fighting each other. And to me, it was beautifully told, and it wasn't a lot of false finishes to me, because it was like, man, you're going to have to like put these dudes like 15 feet under to hold them down for a 3 count. And when Omega kicked out on one, to me, that was like, holy shit, he's fired up now. Like that was the turning point. If you notice, Ospreay had a lot of offense in the first half of that match. Omega really never got him. He was battling back, but Omega really was never able to string things together. Ospreay always seemed to have his number, right?
Okay, yeah.
When Omega finally kicked out on one, that was him flipping the switch. That was him going, all right, now it's go time.
True. So it kind of reminded me of when Hogan used to kick out of somebody's finish and kind of hulk up.
And he would do the, he would hulk up.
Yeah. So okay, and I get that, but what you just said kind of takes me back to the nature of the podcast again. You said that they just did a Japanese style match, right? Mm-hmm. But they did it on a US based pay-per-view. So that's not the audience that you're catering to.
Right.
The US audience is, I mean, for better or for worse, the US audience is conditioned to understand a certain type of match.
Correct.
So when you go against the grain on that, it's different, but does it make it better? Same as what, we'll get to this later, is what makes wrestling what it is. What makes you a fan of wrestling? Is it the story or is it the in-ring?
Right.
We'll figure that out later. We'll discuss that as we get to it. But again, my point, I say all that to say is, if you're going to cater to your audience, this pay-per-view is a detractor of that. They have some audience that wants to see these dream matches and they want to see these, never before seen matches. I get that. I like seeing it too. Don't get me wrong. I like the in-ring stuff. So I get it. But would I go back and pay another $100 for it again? If they did this once every 3 months, once a quarter, would you consistently pay to see these dream? Because you can only have so many dream matches before they're no longer dream matches. They're just bastardized.
Right.
I guess a comparison I would make to what you just said, though, take Will Ospreay and Kenny Omega, stand them side by side. Put on the other side, put Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar over there. Which group is the real superheroes here? Which group is Iron Man and the Incredible Hulk and Thanos, and which group is damn Black Widow and Hawkeye? So there's a level of superhero, but Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar didn't do half as many false finishes as Ospreay and Kenny Omega did, and they did a lot. You had a lot of spears, a lot of F5s, but not as many as we saw this weekend. I mean, and again, and like I said, it's going to be for your taste. It's going to be
it's very subjective.
It is. But again, you're catering it to an audience that's conditioned to more of my style of wrestling. So when you're trying to grow your company, they're still a young company. They're not, 40 years in like WWE. When you're trying to grow your company, Is this going to be the kind of event that you're going to sell to the casual fan? Or is this going to be the kind of event that only has a small sect of your group that's really dead set into this?
Yep, it's a hardcore wrestling fan base for that style.
Exactly, and that's my thing. You don't grow your company on your hardcore. They already have their hardcore fans. Their hardcore fans are the 700,000-800,000 that tune in to Dynamite every single week. Them people ain't going nowhere. They're not shaking. They're always going to watch. If you're trying to grow your audience, let's say you want to get over 1 million, well, you need 300,000 new people to tune in on a week-to-week basis, and they're not getting it because of specialized catered events to the group that they already got. It's like in sales, when somebody says, hey, I want to buy it, you don't keep selling that product. You move to another product to try and bundle it in together. If I, like I work with insurance. If you say, hey, I want to buy your insurance for my car, well, I'm never going to speak about the car again. I already got you there. Now I got to sell you on my house, my motorcycle, my boat, my RV. I feel like AEW says, hey, you really like our in-ring product? Well, let us double down on it and give you all of it that you can handle. Well, they got those people already. What are you? So like someone like me, who's I'm a more casual AEW fan because I've been a WWE fan for so long. How are you winning me over to make me want to buy your pay-per-view now based on what you're giving me, based on what you're offering me? And that's just my point of it is this pay-per-view, for the hardcore wrestling fan, this is a dream pay-per-view. You wait all year for this. This is almost like your WrestleMania. But that's, 250,000 people, 250, 300,000 of your hardcore fans. Where them other 700,000-800,000 people coming from? What are you giving them for that?
So let's flip it and let's continue down this path. We had a whole different outline put out for this episode, but this seems like a better conversation than our outline. So let's flip it for a minute. So you're looking at it from the AEW side of the Forbidden Door.
Yeah.
What about the New Japan side of the Forbidden Door?
Well, for them, they get exposure. Exactly. I completely understand why they would do it, but
they're getting exposure.
But keep in mind, they're not the hosts of it. This wasn't a New Japan promotion. New Japan didn't foot the bill for this.
So I don't know the particulars, but I do know that even though we see it as AEW Forbidden Door, if you look at how the card is promoted, it does say AEW and New Japan Wrestling bring to you Forbidden Door. So it is a co-promoted event. To me, I think, just like you're saying, I do agree with some of the stuff that you're saying, especially from the American side. Looking at it from the Japanese side, how they are using these type of events and these type of promotions to grow their fan base back because they have struggled through the years. Also, they're getting fresh eyes on their product because they're seeing American wrestlers that they've never seen before.
Definitely.
But don't know if you paid attention to when some of these people were talking about, like Excalibur was talking about the ages of some of these wrestlers.
Yeah.
They've 20, 25, 30, 35, 40 years of experience, right?
Yeah.
So New Japan is also looking at this going, we may not have any younger talent at home, so let's borrow some of this younger talent that's in AEW to grow our fans. You've had Lance Archer, who couldn't freaking buy a win in AEW. He's been in New Japan tearing it up.
Yeah. A lot of American wrestlers go to New Japan
and they've done that
since
the 70s and 80s.
Right. And so there you bring up a real good point about that. New Japan's been around as long as WWE, if not longer, right?
Right.
So they should be the established talent in the world. They should be the talent they should be the promotion that spearheads a Forbidden Door type event because they've been around as long as, they've been around. They're as old as Methuselah, as country folks used to say.
And they did at one point. Antonio Inoki was wrestling in the WWE back in the 80s for a long time. They had a huge partnership with New Japan and WWF back in the day, right?
Yeah.
And then something happened in the 90s where New Japan also said, hey, there's WCW over there too. I'm going to go play with them too.
Yeah.
I can go play in both sandboxes. This is great.
Yeah.
Vince being Vince said, no, hell no, you don't.
Yeah,
you either play with me or we don't play at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely all enough.
And that's the real Forbidden Door. That's where it stands between WWE and the rest of the world.
So that takes us back to the very genesis of this conversation. Mm-hmm. What does it benefit WWE to work with anybody else when they're so far ahead of the pack as far as the business is concerned? Working with anybody else. Let's say you take an AJ Styles, who's already comfortable with working in New Japan, already comfortable with the style, already comfortable with the talent.
Right.
If he goes and wrestles a New Japan guy and loses, well, that devalues AJ Styles as a character to the American fan who the WWE is set to cater to, because he's losing to an essential nobody. Unless he goes over there and loses to, one of the few Japanese wrestlers that you really, really know, he's lost to a nobody. I mean, because WWE talent or WWE fans, they're not hip on all the New Japan guys. So you don't want to devalue your own guys. So you're either going to have New Japan come in the Forbidden Door and lose all the matches and then get kicked out of the Forbidden Door, or you're going to have some of your talent having to take those falls to guys that, that I'm not going to care about on Monday morning when Raw comes back, because I'm never going to see him again.
So right there, that is a great point that you just brought up. And that's where I feel that if WWE was to be in this Forbidden Door game, we wouldn't be having this type of conversation.
No, because WWE would promote the hell out of these guys. They would have them on their TV. Kind of like when WWE worked with ECW way back in the 90s. Yep. They brought those guys in. They made them do a semi-invasion angle. They put them over. They let them wrestle some matches and get some W's. And then they tried to incorporate them into some of their bigger events because they built them up.
Right.
AEW gives the guys one match. Like, who wrestled Punk? What's that guy's name?
I can't remember his name now.
There's my point exactly there.
I can't
that almost shuts the whole conversation down. Now,
No.
You're a New Japan fan. You have no idea who these guys are. Who's the guy that wrestled in the 8-man with Eddie Kingston?
That was Ishii.
Ishii, yeah. The hell is that?
See, that's to your point, that's what AEW needs to do. So if I'm WWE and I'm running this, and we know how WWE runs their game, so I wish I knew how WWE runs their game, because I'd be on the payroll by it.
Absolutely, but we got a general consensus. We got a pretty good idea.
We got an armchair quarterback.
There you go. We got a good idea.
So I mean, if I'm WWE and I've got Bryan Danielson versus Okada, I'm going to run some packages 3 to 4 weeks before that, explaining who Okada is, explaining what he's meant to New Japan, how many titles he's won in New Japan. Why do they call him the Rainmaker?
Right. Why do I care?
Why do you care?
That's my point. Why do I care?
WWE would flesh out all of that. If
WWE was going to do this, let's say it's a dream match, right? What you just said was a dream match. WWE would do this at WrestleMania. This would be a WrestleMania level match.
Yeah.
So that means Okada would be in the Royal Rumble.
Yeah.
He would spend 3 to 4 months in the US wrestling on WWE, either TV or pay-per-views or something, to make his name relevant enough to say, okay, this guy is what you say he is, and I'm going to pay good money to see him wrestle. AEW ain't doing that.
Nope.
So again, that takes me back to, what is this pay-per-view for?
Yeah.
This pay-per-view is for that select small group of fans. What is it? The loud minority in the IWC, the Internet Wrestling Community, for them to say, oh my God, I just saw Okada versus Danielson, or I just saw this guy versus that guy. But that's not growing their business. And AEW does a lot of good things, but either they don't promote it correctly or they just don't accentuate it enough to grow the business. I mean, let's say if Daniel Bryan from WWE wrestled Okada, like you said, they would have built that up to be a damn Hogan Warrior. They were Hogan Savage. They would have had you thinking that this was the biggest match you could ever possibly see. To whereas me, the casual fan who's heard Okada's name a few times, maybe seen him wrestle 3 times in my life, didn't see enough to be like, oh my God, I didn't see enough this past weekend to say, oh my God, this guy's the best in the world. Hell, that was supposed to be a match for best in the world. 5 matches before that, we had CM Punk come out and call himself the best in the world. What the hell? What are we doing here? We're counterproducing each other at this point. I mean, on the same pay-per-view, you got guys, everybody's the best in the world. Well, it should have been a 3-way then. If everybody's the best in the world. But that's again, why do we have this pay-per-view? If it's not going to grow your business, it's not going to accelerate any of your storylines, what did it do for you as AEW? That's like you said, that's the new conversation. This whole thing just went to shit in the handbasket real quick, or to hell in the handbasket real quick. But I think it's a better conversation. I agree with you.
Yeah, and I do agree on the why are we having this. I do see that point of view. If two more of these come down the road and you're still stale and you're running the same deal two more times down the road.
So that's 4 total. We've already done 2.
I will totally get on the bandwagon with you.
Well, the company's ready to shut the doors at that point. If they have 4 failing pay-per-views, in consecutive pay-per-views, they do it over and over again. At that point in time, you're shutting the doors. I mean,
the point,
it's too late then.
The major point that I do agree with you on is, how is AEW using this to grow their business?
They're not.
They're not right now.
No.
They are not. And I do agree
Except
with
for the way that they could say, hey, we had the match that you've waited your whole life to see. And they do have that under their belt. And I got to give it to them. They are giving the hardcore fans what they want.
Right.
Nobody else is doing that. If you're a big-time New Japan guy, you're not getting any of that in WWE. You're not getting, they're not bringing anybody in. They're not, drafting talent. They're supposed to be looking at NXT Japan sometime soon. So we may eventually get to that point. But even if we do, that's going to be an NXT thing. So you're going to have a couple NXT guys go over there and job out to New Japan, which you want to see Roman Reigns versus an Okada or these other names that AEW brought in. You want to see Roman Reigns wrestle these guys. Let's be honest. You want to see Brock Lesnar get in there with a Ichii and just say, let's just go out there and just beat the hell out of each other. You want to see that. What you don't want to see is Suzuki and them damn punches again. If I have to watch that one more time on AEW TV, that's going to be a whole nother podcast that I'm going to rant on. And I get it, what you said earlier, it's Japanese style. Okay. The Orange Cassidy match, they went through that. The guys just walk up, place their hand on the back of some guy's neck, square up with a forearm, and then floor a guy. In American style wrestling, ain't nobody standing there waiting to get floored. Let me rephrase that. In believable style wrestling, ain't nobody standing there waiting for a guy to knock you, to mollywop you on the face.
So therein lies.
That's not going to work in an American audience.
Therein lies the disconnect. Lies the disconnect.
So you're seeing everything you're saying is a disconnect. So
for you.
I think you're disconnecting here.
For you, it's a disconnect because I'm about to tie it up for me.
Okay.
In order to connect the dots, AEW is expecting you as the wrestling fan to do all of that homework.
What?
But you said there are only a certain section of fans that AEW currently has that's going to do that, right?
A loud minority.
Okay. So AEW is expecting you as the wrestling fan to go watch New Japan.
What?
Why? Why are they expecting you as a wrestling fan?
The better question is how. I don't even know how to watch New Japan.
Just like Ring of Honor, it's behind a paywall.
Yeah. So, so that goes back. So that benefits New Japan greatly. It does nothing for AEW again. So they're shooting themselves in the foot by hosting this pay-per-view.
What would really benefit AEW is to have a WWE network and host New Japan Wrestling, Ring of Honor, MLW, whoever else that they want to put on there. It would really benefit them in the long run, especially if they want to keep doing these cross-promotion pay-per-views.
In the short term, I feel I'll get, same thing. What would benefit them would to be have a real working relationship with them and bring these guys in all throughout the year.
Yep.
If I saw 6 Okada matches before I saw Okada versus Danielson, I saw him in there with some mid-tier guys that aren't necessarily Bryan Danielson, but they got a good work rate. Wheeler Yuta, he's in the same faction.
Yep.
Claudio Castagnoli, he ain't no main eventer, but if I saw Okada wrestle those two guys and beat them, well, now he's going for the big dog, the top dog. Yeah, now I'm invested. Now I'm like, oh my God, is he going to smoke through the whole BCC or what's going to happen? as an aside, though, Daniel Bryan beating him with a broken freaking arm. I mean, Jesus.
That dude is a machine.
Yeah, you got to give that guy props for that. Because, I mean.
And sit there through the scrum afterwards with a smile on his face.
With a broken freaking arm. He can call it fractured all he wants. Brie Bella posted, Brie Garcia posted pictures. That's a clean break. I mean, there's no, the bone ain't touching no more from the top part to the bottom part.
Yep.
That man wrestled with a broken freaking arm and still stayed in a match with Okada, hung with Okada, actually submitted Okada. I mean, he found a way to make it look like, okay, this happened. So, yeah, all props to Daniel Bryan, regardless of whether or not the pay-per-view should happen. And let me make sure I'm clear. Regardless of whether or not I think it's good for the business, the in-ring product was great. It was long as hell. They definitely could have shaved off an hour of that pay-per-view, and I would have been fine with it. Every match could have gave me 5 minutes back, and that would have been great. But the in-ring quality was amazing. I mean, they put up from bell to bell. Yeah, they should absolutely have this pay-per-view. I'll give them that going forward. They should absolutely have this pay-per-view going forward for the in-ring work. They shouldn't have it under an AEW banner because it's not an AEW style event. They need to build it up more. I mean, they just need to put the work in. Anybody can go out there and put on a match. If I had connections here and I could get, an AEW guy and let's say an NXT guy to get in the ring together, yeah, they'd make magic. It'd be wonderful. And everybody would pop for it because it's two competing brands wrestling against you. If there ain't no story behind it, who cares?
Okay, so let me counterpoint you right there, and we going long in the tooth here, so we're going to try to wrap up shortly. But let me counterpoint you right there. Seth versus Braun Breaker. Did you watch that match?
Absolutely. Good match. Good match.
Was there story behind that?
I mean, so yeah, Braun Breaker's the top guy at NXT. He called out Seth Rollins, 2 weeks ahead of time. Seth Rollins came back a week later and said, yeah, I'll take your challenge on. I'll hold myself accountable. I've got history in NXT. I'll come back and defend my main roster world title here. Yeah. And Triple H said that title was going to be defended across all platforms and all. So there was a little story there. Okay. There was at least enough for me to say, okay, I'm interested.
So what if I told you Ospreay Omega had the same exact story?
Where was it, though?
Exactly. Because you've never delved into the world of New Japan. You wouldn't know that 6 years ago, when Omega was leaving New Japan, he looked at Ospreay and said, you're the next guy. You're my protege. Okay. You've got to take over, and you've got to run this. They battled back and forth, even with New Japan's battling with UK brands. Mm-hmm. Him and Ospreay battled back and forth. And when Omega left, Ospreay looked at it like, you're my mentor. Why are you leaving? Mm-hmm. I don't need you to leave me right now. I need to be under your tutelage. You should be training me.
Okay.
When he left, Ospreay felt abandoned. And that's the story. But again,
if you don't put that on AEW TV and then have an AEW pay-per-view, that's a wasted story. I mean, that you got all that. I feel like if WWE gets a hold of both of these guys, let's say 3 years from now, that they would go buy that footage. I mean, and Tony Khan has no problem buying what he needs to get his story. They would go buy that footage.
Countdown for one night for Danielson.
I mean, yeah, right. So he licensed that music for one particular match. He paid a pretty penny for that, I'm sure. But WWE would go get that footage. They would show that footage. They would do a sit down with those two guys. They would do 6 to 8 week build up for a match of that quality. To whereas if you ain't never heard of either guy's name, you would care by the time the bell rang, you would have a reason to be invested more than the fact that it was Okada versus Omega or Ospreay versus Omega. That's not enough to get in the casual fan. Because the casual fans like, who the hell is Will Ospreay? I don't know. I remember Mike Quackenbush from way back in the day. He had an interesting name, and his sister was a gymnast at the college I went to. So I was like, oh, I know this guy. He was once regarded as the best pro wrestler in the world before Daniel Bryanson. This is late 90s. This is when Daniel Bryanson hadn't even trained yet. But this guy was Will Ospreay of back in the day. He was Kenny Omega of back in the day. He never wrestled on WWE television, WCW television, Impact, ECW. So everybody listening to this is like, who? They have no idea who I'm talking about.
Exactly.
But this guy was once regarded as the best pound for pound wrestler in the world, and it got him nothing. At this point in time, I feel like AEW is doing the same thing. They're putting on the best wrestling matches in the world, and it's getting them nothing. That's not good for their young and upcoming business. You need to have the guys that, so you got half the WWE's, you got most of NXT's old Black and Gold's roster. You got, a small part of AEW's or WWE's former main event roster. And hell, you've got all the legends from WWE past that are over there now. Take advantage of what you have and put these people in the right places to make your product marketable to everyone. You don't need to focus on that small select group and say, I'm going to cater to you. You already got them. You don't need to cater to them this much anymore. You don't need a whole pay-per-view for this. They could have had one match. Okada versus Danielson would have got all those guys in, right? Nobody that didn't tune in wouldn't have just tuned in for that match. But you could have got so many other guys in if you would have incorporated some of the WWE guys that you ain't using anyway into the pay-per-view. Where's Miro at? You see Miro this weekend? No. Where's Alistair?
I saw a promo with Miro.
Where's Malachi Black?
Again,
all the guys that are,
with Malachi.
That's good. I think you're confusing that with Collision. I don't think we saw any of that on Forbidden Door. But bring those guys. Those guys got name value. Bring them in. Use them. They're on your payroll. But again, I say all this to say, again, from my point of view, you don't need this pay-per-view. You need to have this. You need to sprinkle these matches into your already established pay-per-views. You got All Out coming. You got the event in Wembley coming. You got a lot of stuff coming. Just sprinkle these matches into those to up those buy rates. If you're going to sell, I don't know, 800,000 buys for the Wembley pay-per-view, right? Sprinkle in Okada versus Danielson there, you might go over 1 million. You might get it up to 1.5 million. You might make a bigger dent by having just one of these dream matches sprinkled into your regular pay-per-views than you will by having a select pay-per-view that isn't going to appeal to people that already aren't going to buy that. That's all I'm saying with this here. So I know there's people out there that are, their heads are doing flips right now because they're like, oh my God, we have to have Forbidden Door. And then there's people out there that are listening that are like, wait, Forbidden Door was this past weekend? They had no clue it even happened. So, I mean, I know we've got a wide spectrum here that we're working to, and we're just trying to figure it out amongst ourselves. So that's my take on it. That's just where I land.
So for me, my take is, should it be closed? Hell no. Keep it wide open. Matter of fact, take the door down, put in an archway, don't put hinges back up. Keep it open. But AEW needs to do a better job at promoting who these people are from New Japan, why these matches matter, connect the dots for your casual fans. I will agree on every one of those points, but I will take this one step further. Should we keep the Forbidden Door open? Hell yes, in the whole damn wrestling community.
Ah, well,
I want to see people from
that's a completely different conversation for a completely different
and we'll
podcast.
Get to that another day.
Absolutely. But here's where I want to leave you at. Should we keep the Forbidden Door open? That's up to them to decide. That's for them. Did we see an amazing 4 to 6 to 9 hours of wrestling over the weekend? Absolutely. Yeah. Give me a cheers on the wrestling that we saw here, just as a fan of the business.
We'll cheers.
All right. So all right. So we got that. If nothing, wherever we land on what we think about it, we damn sure saw a lot of good wrestling this weekend. And for me, I'm always a fan of that. So absolutely. If we're not going to close the Forbidden Door, but we're going to get great wrestling out of it, I'm a fan.
All right. With that, everybody, we thank you for listening to the Bookers Alliance podcast today. Reach out on our social media platforms, drop us a line, have some conversation. As you can tell, we don't shy away from conversation. We love talking about this.
Absolutely not. And we also don't shy away from this whiskey here. We want to send out a shout out to the Bros Brothers here.
Absolutely.
Based out of, from my understanding, based out of St. Louis, but wherever they're based out of, they got some good whiskey here. And we also don't shy away from the real world here. In the real world here, we go through a lot of things here, and every now and again, some of us go through what we call the birthdays where we get a little older. So on our way out, we're going to say, happy birthday to you.
Oh, Lord Jesus, help me.
Happy birthday to you.
Hallelujah. Thank you, Lord.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Marky Mark.
Salute. Thank you, sir.
All right.
I appreciate that. Thank you. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening today. Thank you for everything that you guys do for us in the wrestling community. And for that, we bid you adieu.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
Today's podcast was produced by SBP. You can find our podcast on all major podcast platforms. Also connect with us on our social media accounts. Search for The Bookers Alliance on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.